Okay, so picture a battlefield, but not the kind we usually think of. Instead of trenches and tanks, think rockets and ideas. This was the space race, right? A
Yeah.
clash between the US and the Soviet Union that went way beyond reaching for the stars.
Exactly. I mean, it was a war with a very different set of weapons. It reshaped how we think about technology and the effects on global politics. Huge. Let's not forget the propaganda either.
Definitely. So the big question we're diving into today is, was this whole thing really just about scientific advancement? Or was it about something more, something a bit more like, well, power?
Right. That's the real story here. This wasn't just a science fair competition. It was about proving whose system was better, whose ideas would shape the future.
Exactly. We've got some really interesting material for this deep dive. We'll hit the key moments and dig into some of those really fascinating questions, the kind that haven't really been answered. So let's set the scene. It's 1945, World War II has just ended, and you've got these two superpowers rising from the ashes with completely opposite views of the world. You've got the capitalist US and the communist Soviet Union.
And they both needed, desperately, to prove their system was the best. And space, this unexplored frontier, well, it became the ultimate symbol of that. It wasn't just about bragging rights. This was about global influence and showing off technological muscle.
Okay, but here's the thing that I find so interesting. You might think both these superpowers would start their space programs from scratch, right? A clean slate, pure innovation. But what our sources are showing is something else. They both relied heavily on, get this, captured German scientists and their rocket technology. I mean, how crazy is that?
It is wild. I mean, the irony is almost too much. This technology, developed for war, was now being used for this entirely new kind of competition. They both actively sought out these German minds like Wernher von Braun.
Yeah, von Braun, the guy who helped Nazi Germany develop the V-2 rocket. Talk about a complicated past, right?
Absolutely. And the Soviets had their own secret weapon,
Yeah.
Sergei Korolev. A brilliant engineer, but they kept his identity under wraps for years. That tells you just how seriously they were taking their space program. So from the very beginning, this wasn't just about scientific progress. It was tied up with this legacy of war and, well, some pretty unsettling origins.
So let's fast forward a bit. October 4th, 1957. This is when things really heat up. A moment that basically shocked the entire world, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Sputnik 1. The Soviet Union launches the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. It seems so simple now, but back then it was groundbreaking, and it had a ripple effect that was felt instantly, everywhere. Sputnik changed the game. Suddenly, it wasn't just about scientific curiosity. It was about, well, a potential threat. Could the Soviets launch other things into space? And what about missiles?
Our sources really highlight the global reaction to Sputnik. It wasn't just people going, oh, it's cool. It was more like, wait, what? This little beeping satellite really shook people up. Why such a strong reaction?
Well, imagine you're the U.S., and you suddenly realize your rival can put something in orbit. What's next? Nuclear missiles. That fear, that sense of vulnerability, that's what drove the panic. The space race became less about exploration and more about national security, about survival.
And the U.S. response, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly smooth sailing at first, right? That whole Vanguard TV3 thing, not their finest hour.
Yeah, let's just say it was a bit of a flop. That very public failure was embarrassing, to say the least. Suddenly, the U.S. looked like they were falling behind big time.
Yeah.
And that perception, domestically and internationally, was a real problem.
But as they say, sometimes you got to hit rock bottom to really get moving, right?
Yeah.
It seems like that's exactly what happened. The U.S. pumped a ton of money into research, and of course, there's the creation of NASA. So maybe Sputnik was kind of a blessing in disguise. I mean, it really lit a fire under the U.S. space program.
You could definitely see it that way. The Soviets may have taken the early lead, but they also woke up a sleeping giant. The U.S. was determined to catch up and surpass them, whatever it took.
Right. And just a few years later, another huge milestone, another Soviet first. April 12th, 1961. Yuri Gagarin becomes the first human to orbit the Earth.
Gagarin's flight was absolutely mind-blowing, a massive leap for humanity and for the Soviets. Well, it was a propaganda goldmine. The sources we've looked at really emphasize how much this rattled the U.S.
It wasn't just about coming in second anymore, was it? This was about global perception. If the Soviets were this advanced in space, what else could they be ahead in? It became a way to prove whose system, communism or capitalism, was the better one. Every first, every achievement was a message to the world.
That's exactly it. The Cold War was this backdrop of constant tension. And space became this arena where the two sides could show off their tech, their innovation, their way of life. It was all about winning hearts and minds, and Gagarin's flight was a huge win for the Soviets.
And so the U.S. needed to do something big. And then we get this incredibly bold challenge from President John F. Kennedy, a man on the moon before the decade's end.
Talk about a power move. Kennedy's speech changed everything. He shifted the entire focus of the space race onto this one incredibly ambitious goal, the moon landing. It was the ultimate prize.
And then, of course, July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong. One small step. It's one of those moments that's etched in our collective memory. This is widely seen as the American victory in the space race. But was it really that simple? And if it was such a clear win, why did the Soviets keep going with their own program, even if it went in a different direction? Maybe their goals were different all along.
Symbolically, the moon landing was a huge victory for the U.S., no doubt about it. They achieved what Kennedy had set out to do. But then you've got these questions that our sources raise. Why did the U.S. stop sending people to the moon? Why didn't the Soviets even try? There's got to be more to the story, right?
Yeah, and the sources offer some possible answers. The cost, the danger. But then there's that little hint of something else, that idea that maybe there was something on the moon that we weren't supposed to find. It's like they're suggesting there might be some secret reason why everything just stopped. Were the risks too high? Or was there something else going on that we don't know about? That's what makes this whole era so fascinating.
It really does make you think. Maybe the official story isn't the whole story. Maybe the risks changed or the goals shifted in a way we don't fully understand.
So what we're seeing is that the space race wasn't just about science. It was about power, ideology, global influence, and propaganda played a huge role in all of it. Those big moments we talked about, Sputnik, Gagarin, the moon landing, they were all about something bigger than just technological achievement. They were part of this larger Cold War drama.
And the mystery surrounding the end of the race, that's what keeps us coming back to this story. It makes us look deeper, question what we think we know.
It makes you wonder about the future of space exploration, too. Will we see another race, this time to Mars? Will space travel become something ordinary? And then there's that question our sources leave us with. Are we being watched? Are we alone? It's definitely something to think about.
It really connects those ambitions from the past to our fascination with the universe today. And who knows what we might discover next.
Absolutely. Okay, now I want to hear from you. What do you think about all this? Why do you think the moon landing stopped? What's the next big step for humanity in space? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the deep dive. And of course, share this with anyone who you think would find it interesting. What other historical mysteries should we explore? Let us know. You never know. Your suggestion could be our next episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.